Hey guys, I'm Sal. Thanks for checking out the video. Today we'll be addressing a coolant leak that I found under the front of my car after driving it a little bit more often than I usually do. There aren't too many places it could be leaking from, so I assumed it would either be from the water pump or the thermostat housing, and we'll be resealing both of those up. This video is picking up where my last video left off, where I also replaced the valve cover gasket and the front main seal. To get to the front main seal, I took off a bunch of this stuff on the front of the engine, which is where these clips are coming from. The process was pretty straightforward, but you can go back and check out that video for a little bit more detail. I'll have it linked in the description. With everything cleared up out front, we're ready to dig into this cooling system and get the car back on the road. Let's get started. Okay, sweet. So I'm pretty sure that the leak was coming from either the water pump or the thermostat housing, because there were signs of coolant leaking down the front of the timing cover and then kind of on top of the oil pan. It's really nice that the SR20 has an external water pump like this because it can be removed with just 5 bolts. After knocking it loose, you can see that the extra coolant in the block is red. Now, according to everything I've read online, you should be using green coolant in these engines, so I'm not sure if that contributed to these leaks or if there's any other damage caused because of that too. Next, the thermostat housing came off just as easily as the water pump, and then I took some time to clean up the mating surfaces on the engine side. This is a friendly reminder that even if you drain all the coolant out from the radiator, there still will be some left in the block that'll pour out when you pull off the water pump, so make sure you're ready with something to catch it in. Okay, cool. So we'll start with the thermostat housing. It looks a little rough, but it's definitely reusable, and I plan to clean it up before reinstalling it back on the engine. The thermostat that I pulled off the car did not have any OE markings on it, and the design of it doesn't quite match the OEM one that I bought to replace it. It never caused me any problems at all. The car always heated up quickly and never overheated, but it was something I wanted to replace with OEM while I had it all apart. I picked up this water pump specific gasket maker and spread it onto the mating surface. It came out pretty thick, probably way more gasket than I need, so I'm not sure if they sell any nozzles that you could screw onto the end and have less of it come out. It was just really globby, and I'm a little worried that too much excess on the inside could make its way through the cooling system and cause some clogs in the future. So after seating the thermostat in its place, I installed the housing and then got it bolted up hand tight. The directions for most of these RTV gasket makers is usually to hand tighten it first, and then after it sets up for about an hour, you can go back through and torque them down the rest of the way. Next up was the water pump assembly, and for this I probably could have used the same one that was on the car and then just resealed it, but it's another one of those peace of mind things where now I just know that the water pump is fresh and shouldn't cause me any issues. Plus, I decided to go for OEM because they were pretty reasonably priced, and I didn't mind spending a little bit extra money over an aftermarket one for OEM quality. They don't come with the studs to mount the fan clutch, so I needed to use the double nut method to pull the studs off the old pump. Once I did that, I added some blue Loctite to the threads and then just installed them on the new pump, no problem. This little thing of gasket maker went a really long way, and I was able to use it again for this mating surface as well. Same deal as before though, it came out so globby that it was just hard to keep it even and not have way too much of it all the way around the outside. Also, if you've spent any time with RTV, you'll know that once you get it on your skin, it just gets absolutely everywhere. So this is a little dumb of me to use my bare fingers, and I definitely recommend using disposable gloves. Putting the water pump back on the car, I was just careful to place it on as straight as I could, and then just being ready with a bolt to hold it in place. Same deal as before, I just did it hand tight at first, and then tightened it the rest of the way later. By this point, it had actually been about an hour since I did the thermostat housing, so I went ahead and tightened them down. I'm sure you can find a torque spec out there somewhere, but my torque wrench is one of the bigger ones, and it's not really accurate at those lower numbers, so I opted to just go with the tried and true torque spec of good and tight. Next, I really wanted to get rid of these red coolant hoses in the engine bay. I picked up the replacement set from ISR and found that they were a little bit longer than the ones that were installed. I figured they'd probably do this to adapt to various radiator setups, but in my case it caused a little bit of a kink in the hose and I needed to trim a little bit off the end. It was really easy to do with the razor blade, and it solved the problem. I wanted to do this since I bought the car though, so it feels really good to finally swap these out. I just prefer the clean look, with the valve cover being more the focal point, as really the only red in the engine bay. Plus, the red ones just show dirt really easily and were just kind of starting to show their age. It was the same situation on the other side, so a little bit of trimming helped out over there as well. Okay, cool. So the next order of business is bolting up this fan shroud. The one that I had on here was all cracked and it was being held up by zip ties. So I bought this new OEM one that I wanted to hang up the proper way of doing it with the bolts on the front. But as you saw, the bolt holes on this the passenger side, I guess, weren't really lining up. And I looked a little bit closer and saw that it's because it's got this lip on the shroud, and this radiator is like a no-name radiator, and whoever welded it up just kind of, I think it's like a little bit off, and you can see I can't lift up the shroud enough to get the bolt hole to line up with where it's supposed to. So my idea was, if I trimmed off this little lip there, then I would be able to lift up the shroud enough to get the bolt in, and then I still wouldn't be losing a ton of airflow, and it would still be an efficient system. So I was just using these side cutters that I have. They worked really, really well. It was just a pretty slow and tedious process. Got it sanded up, and then threw it back in the car, and would you look at that? Bolted right up. You would never even guess that I modified it at all. And I think even if I went to a different radiator in the future, I still wouldn't expect any issues there. I pulled the shroud back out so that we can put the pulley on for the clutch fan, throw the belts on, and then finally, of course, get the fan back on there. So you can throw the belts on. The one on the alternator goes on the back. The one for the power steering goes on the front. You can tighten the power steering one now, but you want to wait for tightening the one that goes around the alternator, because that pulley isn't exactly tight on there. So when you tighten it down, it gets all crooked and wonky. So wait till you have the fan on and that tightened down, and then you'll be able to go in and tighten down that other belt. Fan goes on, just 4 bolts or 4 nuts. Pretty much a big pain in the butt. I have the ratcheting wrenches, which makes it goes a little bit easier, but still kind of a pain. Also a big pain getting that shroud in around the fan. It was a tight squeeze, but able to be done. And then, yeah, tightened up that belt, throwing the new black hoses on, and I am really, really happy with how it looks. It looks funky with the full shroud in there, because I'm used to seeing the cracked one where you can see the fan underneath it, but it goes exactly like I wanted it to, with the red on the valve cover pop in, and then everything else just kind of fading away. Okay, so knowing that I had all that red coolant in the engine, I wanted to try and flush that out as most as I could. So I opted to do a full drain and flush with just distilled water first, and you can see all this crud that's just kind of in the system. So I think it was good to do a full drain before filling it up with the actual coolant. So you can see I have this really cool reservoir that sits on top of the radiator and just kind of holds the water. I got it at Harbor Freight. It was pretty affordable. Adapters for different types of radiators and overflow tanks and everything. Got the car started up and let it, just kind of bleed out, having the heat on high and letting the coolant start flowing through, especially once the thermostat opens up, and letting all the air pockets out of there. This was the first time the car had started in like over a month, because I had done all the oil seals and then all this coolant stuff, so it was good. Started up first try, and at this point you can see that the coolant was hot. It had pulled a little bit more of the red leftover coolant out of the engine, and then I was able to drain it. The full drain and fill took about 1.5 gallons of distilled water, but when I'm filling it up with this new green coolant, because like I mentioned earlier, when you drain the radiators, a lot of it is still left in the block. I only ended up filling up this gallon, and I didn't even use all of it, but filled up the reservoir again, started the car, let it bleed itself out for a little bit, same deal, heat on high, letting it run. And one of the benefits of using this reservoir is when you're done, you can just pop this plug in, pull it out, and let it drain into your drain pan. So I did not have this when I did the timing belt on the Tundra, and when I had to refill the coolant system there, man, it made such a mess. had coolant flying out the open hole in the top of the radiator, and oh, it was just so messy. So this is a huge buy, and I would definitely recommend it for any time you bleed the cooling system. Threw the coolant or the radiator cap back on, and with that we were all good to go. This was a pretty big project for me, but I was really happy that it all got figured out good and got it all back together. It was nice to have the hood on and looking like a car again. It took a little bit of adjusting, but got it back to where it was. Unfortunately, here you can see I didn't fix all the oil leaks. There's a little bit of oil leaking, and I think it's coming from the timing cover, which super sucks. But other than that, all the other projects are wrapped up. Engine's running tip-top shape again. Cooling system is reset. Oil seals are done as good as I could, and I'm just excited to have this car back on the road again. So thank you so much for watching. Thanks for subscribing, and have a great rest of your day.